Thank you, Alex. Appreciate you checking in.
Thank you, Pierre.
Dr. Davey, if you're set, I'll kick the meeting off.
Sure. I just want to say thank you very much to our board members and our cabinet team members and Mrs. Myers for joining tonight. Nice to see everyone virtually. I will share just out of being as safe as possible, even our February board meeting, we're planning on being remote. Just in follow-up to our January meeting, and we can talk about that at a later time, but just to be safest for everyone and then to move forward. I want to thank our cabinet team and Mrs. Myers as we're presenting tonight on the agenda or the budget, the proposed budget as we're moving forward. Very pleased to be presenting a well thought out budget. We know that these are very difficult times. Mrs. Boyce and Plattsburgh, I know as a board president and your role, you're facing it every day. And Ms. Giro, I know in your work as well as a member of our board, you know, you're seeing the impact of what's happening in the pandemic and the health challenges, and our team is facing it every day. But we're also putting our best foot forward with, like you are in your districts, to really provide excellent services to our children. So we're thankful to be providing this opportunity and really pleased that CVS is continuing to really stay true to our mission. And I think we're doing it very well and exceptionally. And I can't say enough about our teachers and our leaders who are stepping up every day to provide the best education possible. So, Mr. Bell, I'm going to turn it over to you as we get started here and then move into our process here.
Thank you, Dr. Davey. I'm going to share my screen. That'll be the best format, I think, for this meeting to continue to do so. If you can't see something, please just give me a shout. I'll try to make it larger. I know Megan did for board members upload the information into your portal, and our team members, I did share via email to you. We have a few extra things that we're going to throw into this today. We're really trying to give you up to the minute information as Dr. Davey was gathering some stuff today and yesterday. We didn't want to hold back, so you'll see a few other items that I'm going to pull up separate from the presentation. We'll talk about it. Jumping into our key dates in the budget process, we have our big budget presentation to the board on February 10th, and that is immediately followed on February 12th with a presentation to the school superintendents and business officials. And then our component districts do have a vote on our administrative budget on April 22nd. So those are really our key dates moving ahead. Our presentation on the board is going to take what you hear today, and we're going to transition from our meeting with Budget Committee, and as a recommendation of the Budget Committee, if you're comfortable with what you see and what the proposal coming through Dr. Davey is, we'll move forward with taking what we showed today and moving that into a presentation to the full board as we're proposing our 2021-2022 school year budgets. The first item, or the next item up on our agenda, is the budget development factors and goals. C through F you've seen before. We're gonna give you a few highlights, but not spend too much time there. A and B we want to touch on and spend a little bit of time on to give our committee members a look at where are we as far as an executive budget proposal. What does that mean for CVS? What does that mean for our districts? We shared with you the ASBO presentation. That's the Association of School Business Officials statewide. They presented last Friday, so we wanted to get that out to you last week so you could get eyes on it. Presented a lot of the same information as our Niscus presentation. So yesterday, Dr. Davey and I attended the Niscus executive budget presentation. And I'm taking slides from the Niscus one because I think it's clearer and easier to understand. So that's what I'm sharing here. In your packet, you do have the full ASBO presentation. We're not going to touch on every one of the slides, but I just want to touch on some of the key points to the executive budget. And we'll start with total funding. What did that look like? It's very important to differentiate between federal funding and state funding when you look at the budget, because at a point in time, the state funding goes away. So every time we're supplementing or replacing state funds with federal funds, there's a point in time there'll be a hole or a gap. So that will always lead to the concerns of what we saw in the early 2010s with the ARRA funds that came to school districts to cover some of that state funding that was taken away, which then immediately led into the GEA, or the gap elimination adjustment, and that stuck around for 6 years. So we're kind of setting up ourselves in a similar boat. So that's why we like to talk about state reduction in funding of $607 million, with increased federal support of $2.7 billion, or a net increase in funds to schools of $2.1 billion. The other items on the slide we're going to dive into in more details shortly, and really show you specifics of them. The governor is asking for more money for New York State. He's saying ideal amount is $15 billion. The budget that he puts out there, has put out there, is anticipating $6 billion in additional funds coming in New York State. All of our advocates are optimistic about receiving that $6 billion from the federal government in the stimulus package, with Chuck Schumer's new majority leader position. We believe that, or our advocates at least believe, Niscus, ASBO, NISBA, and so on and so forth, believe that we will receive that $6 billion at a minimum, and potentially more than that. I will caution you and say that if we do receive more than $6 billion, that it's not necessarily that schools will get more money. So that's not any guarantee in this process. They shared with us, and Dr. David really touched on this at the last budget meeting. Here's kind of put in the numbers. What this is showing is that the actual tax receipts and the revenues coming to the state are better than projected. So you can see the yellow is where it was in October of last calendar year at 75.3%. The executive budget is in the gray, is at 83.5%. So that's, or 83.5 billion, sorry. So that's really positive that is better than we were looking just a short few months ago. And Dr. David really dove into that at our last meeting and was at the front end of that and anticipating it. So now looking, what's the breakdown look like in each of our aid categories? Foundation aid frozen is what the governor is proposing. Services aid, we will discuss that next, but you can see there's a $392 million reduction there, which is where BOCES aid falls, and we're going to get into some significant details there. What you can see in what's highlighted in yellow is that the state is bringing in the STAR funding that offsets your tax levy to your taxpayers. That's being pulled into this calculation and formula, and then a local district funding adjustment is being applied against that STAR amount. And then you can see there are federal COVID-19 supplemental stimulus funds coming to school districts, which gets that net total that they talked about of $2.1 billion additional coming to school districts.
So Mr. Bell, if I could just look at that slide for 1 second, and I think part of the conversation, and since Friday, I'll just share with Ms. Giro and Ms. Boyce, I have had the fortunate opportunity as the liaison for the district superintendents to meet with both David Little, who spent almost 25 years as NISPA's governmental director, and so, but he's now in charge. He's now the executive director for RSA. I also had a meeting this morning with Bob Schneider, who's the executive director for NISPA. Actually, yesterday morning, excuse me, with Jay Verona, who's their chief attorney and deputy director, and Brian Fessler, who's their governmental relations person now. And in both David and in both RSA and NISPA, they pointed to that 3.8. You can see $3.8 billion of supplemental stimulus. That's huge. Mr. Bell, you just touched upon it, and it's going to basically get us out of the fire right now. But what happens if next year, and both David, Jay, and everyone who I talked to, including Niscus, all said, what happens if that money doesn't continue? Because they're bailing us out, it'll make the difference, but we will have a financial cliff next year that's projected to be of $7 billion. That's worse than when the governor took his office at the start of his governorship years ago. So that's obviously something very concerning. There are some positives in there as well. You remember that our school districts have had 20% withheld on many of their funding. There is a proposal in the governor's budget to basically refund at this point all but 5% for most of the categories and then pay it all back. And once they confirm their money, they're planning on putting that much money back in, as well as the restoration for the money that they took out last year, which was over $1 billion. So they are basically planning on paying back some of those things that are overdue, which is really good news. However, it's very concerning about the potential future, and it should get us out of the fire, so to speak, this year in our school districts. So as Osceola Valley, Mrs. Giro and Mrs. Boyce in Plattsburgh, it will make a big difference in when your district puts their budget proposal together, because there actually is some funding to backfill the hole that there is. So thank you, Mr. Bell. I'll turn it back to you, but I just wanted to share both of those priority discussions.
Thank you. And at the bottom here, you can see that divide that Dr. Dave was talking about. State funding is at $27.3.5 billion. When you include the federal, it's $31.208 billion. That's that big gap that Dr. Dave is talking about. The governor is proposing, this is year 2 that we've seen this, combining what they're calling services aid. This is a little bit blurry because I want to make it as big as possible for you. But the governor is proposing, again, combining these 11 categories into one, and then making a mass reduction in that, totaling $692 million reduction in services aid. You can see here a lump sum at the bottom, which has a net impact of that $392 million reduction going to school districts. Important to point out here, transportation aid, BOCES aid, if the formula were to just run as normal, we'd be looking at a 14% increase to the school districts in trans aid and a 4.7% increase in BOCES aid to school districts. These are areas that the governor's targeted because he can't control the spending in these areas. He can't control the revenue flowing to school districts. So this is his attempt of trying to combine all of them together and then control the spending or control the aid flow to districts in all of these categories. So this is one that every one of our groups, like Dr. David mentioned, RSA, NISBA, Niscus, ASBO, are all pushing against, that it would be not good for school districts if this proceeded. And you can see here that $692 million reduction is actually a 17% reduction on the services aid compared to as if it were run by current law. How's that impact our schools? Important to point out here, and this is what we like from Niscus, the inequitable distribution of this. You can see our the poorest districts are impacted the most by that services aid reduction. So that's obviously an inequitable distribution of state aid, or with reduction of state aid. Dr. Davey had touched on this previously, that the state level, they were pushing for trans aid as part of the executive budget for the transportation aid costs that were from March to the end of the school year to serve meals, deliver work, and so on and so forth, would be part of this budget and be covered. And then just recently, Dr. Davey touched on the withholdings. The statement from the budget director is no funds will be withheld from school districts, according to the Division of Budget. So that was on January 22nd.
So, Mr. Bell, one little update from today's DS meeting. Phyllis Morris, who's now the director of educational finance for the state, for state ed, indicated that transportation back aid, the number that she quoted today was $150 million was owed to the districts. When you think of all the districts that delivered food and delivered instructional supplies, and then the state withheld it, it was $150 million that was quoted today that they're planning on paying.
Thank you, Dr. Davey. Yeah, big money. Speaking of big money, prior year aid claims, districts that have ever had a prior year aid claim, I think many of ours have in the past, you get thrown into a queue at state ed, and when they have funds available, they pay down or pay the next person in line. These can be out there for over a decade before you get your money. The governor is saying, let's just clean the slate of that $300 million, but not pay anybody anything. So basically just say any aid that's owed to you for prior years, you're never going to get. Schools, or wiping the slate clean. So that's also part of the executive budget. That's a quick summary from the Niscus piece. We did have a couple of other items that Dr. Davey shared with the group, and we did upload them to the portal just so our committee members could have it. And this was the Board of Regents budget and legislative priorities. So Dr. David, I don't know if you want to touch on This,
Please, just for a minute. So there's two different documents. The original one, the priorities and the state aid, basically was issued on the 14th, and that's with our interim commissioner Rosa. At that point, the new chancellor had not been appointed, but essentially, and Regent Odekirk is actually out, identified in here as one of the more veteran board members, and she's the co-chair of the state aid subcommittee. But they've identified, the different priority areas. They've identified the supports for students with disability, the various state aid issues, the digital equity. So really the priorities that we've been talking about all year, and the state really has come in very strongly to support that. Traditionally, that the Board of Regents priority issues that are shared are not necessarily listened to by the governor. I will share with you, though, that with the new Chancellor Young, and our interim commissioner Rosa, as soon as the governor came out with his executive budget, I will share that they came out very, very strongly, and the commissioner was commended today by the DSs. And that's the first time in 8 years that I've ever heard him say, wow, you really came out strongly in opposite, and really taking on the governor and putting out a public statement about, and there's a quote in here, that you cannot balance the state budget on the backs of our students and forcing school districts to use federal funding to fill their holes in the budget. So very, very, very strong, the strongest wording I've ever seen. I will share with you that, the transportation aid that we talked about, that $150 million is going to be paid back. She actually put a memo out to the schools saying the governor is not going to reimburse this. Now you may say, well, what was that? Well, the governor's office would not put it in writing. The Division of Budget would not put it in writing. And so everyone was telling her that was going to happen back. And you remember, Mr. Bell, when that came out, she actually turned around and put it in writing and said, you are not going to be reimbursed. And we want you to know that we've been told this by the governor's office, by the Division of Budget, and really the entire state. And then that really mobilized everyone. And all the school districts in the state filled out a transportation summary of how much money they were owed. Armed with that, they then went back to the governor's office and said, basically, put it on his desk and said, here you go. It's $150 million and you owe it to the districts. You said because the governor had said they would pay it last spring, and they said it on webinars, and they said it multiple times. And then they turned around and said they weren't going to pay it. So really, it was dirty pool. And I do have to give our interim commissioner, you can tell she's a fighter. She's not afraid to roll up her sleeves, and she has taken some very strong stances. May not be good for the long-term job prospects, but she has taken some very strong stances. And I think she's got a lot of support, especially in the city and downstate, because she's taken strong stances to support our students. And I believe also upstate too. She's growing on everyone. I would say that. So thanks for sharing, and she's been really doing a good job on that. So thank you.
very well said, Dr. Davey. Open up to committee members. Any questions on executive budget or any of the information that's been presented to you before we move on to some other budget development factors? All right, I'm going to jump right to it. Next item up is health insurance, workers' compensation, and an update on our consortium events. So I'm sharing this, and it is hard to read on my screen. I'm going to zoom in to really 2 points. One is this $9.4 million. That's at the end of December. That's our net income so far. That's 50% of the way through the year. We've made almost $9.5 million for our consortium. Very positive news. Amazing news, to be honest with you, is from where we've been the last few years. We've touched on the November ones. I just want to share the December ones with you as well. We've made more progress than where we were, and we are tracking, and you can see our bottom line number here of $34 million. We are tracking and trending to have over $40 million in unrestricted net assets, and the board has options to fund certain reserves, move that money around, but we are trending to be beyond that level if we continue the way we have in the first 6 months of this year. So very positive news as we go into rate setting. Keep in mind that that's going to happen the end of February. So the end of next month, Dr. Davey and the other board of director members will meet and they will approve a rate change for the new year. We'll talk about what we're looking at for rates and what we're projecting in a couple of slides. Workers' compensation, again, I'm sharing kind of the two same points. The $57,000 is our net income for the year. Obviously, doesn't seem as great as 9.4 million, but it's very positive because that means that we're actually beating budget. I'm sliding over a little bit. The 74,500 is our budget. The board of directors made the plan to actually try to build in some increase in our reserves and our unrestricted net assets. As part of this plan, we were planning for 74,500 for the full year. We've been able to accumulate 57,000 as of halfway point in the year. So tracking very well in our workers' comp, right on budget. I would call that on budget, in a good position. And we have about $500,000 in unrestricted net assets there. So pretty much on budget. Moving to our next item, and this is where we start to talk about rates. In our health insurance, really, we talked about teachers' retirement system. We talked about employees' retirement system. Where we didn't really dive into, and that's health insurance. So I'm sure you're wondering and intrigued, and I know our superintendents are and have been asking us similar questions, and we haven't really committed to a number because we don't know, right? That's going to be rate setting, and it's going to be decided from a recommendation from our consultant in working with Empire, as well as presenting to our committees. Those presentations happen throughout the month of February leading up to that rate setting. So really we're taking our best guess here. So Dr. Davey, Christine, and myself have come together and we've settled on a rate. What we've done is for our budgets, we've set an increase in health insurance for family and individual plans of 4% and for our Medicare primaries at 2.5%. And you're probably asking why, if we're looking so good, would we be looking at that type of increase? On average, trend in a health insurance environment and a health insurance consortium, it's going to increase 7 to 8% is what would just be your average normal year to year. If you're on budget, you're going up 7 to 8%. We are currently beating budget. We're doing well. So we believe that that's going to move our rate increase down. It won't be at 7 or 8. It won't be at trend. It'll be somewhere in our belief, it would be somewhere below 5%. So if we were conservative building our budget, we'd choose 5%, which we did. And then also a new factor to our consortium is the retiree drug subsidy funds are going to be subsidized or flowing into the consortium versus flowing out to individual school districts. That amounts to $1.4 million or just over 1% on premium. So if you think about new revenue coming in is just over 1%, conservatively budgeting is 5%. That's how we came up with the 4%. When we look at Medicare primary, last year the consortium had a net 5% increase, and we had a 5.5 for family and individual, and we had a 2.9 for Medicare primary. So there was a disconnect in the premiums. There still is a disconnect. We anticipate the board of directors to address that this year. Not a guarantee, but we're trying to plan for that in our budget, and that really impacts our admin budget. Down here we have that 9% is just a typo. It's really the 4 and the 2.5. What does that mean to CVS? That total cost, it's an additional almost over $300,000 to CVS as we build our budgets. So you take our plans, what we had for plans, just that increase allots to over $300,000. So even that small percentage is a significant impact on CVES. So as we dive into budgets, we are already just starting the year and just rolling our budgets over. We already have a $300,000 budget deficit if all other factors stayed the same just for health insurance. Pretty significant there. ERS, we talked about this. The only thing I wanted to highlight here was that the change in cost. You can see the CVS is actually what we're planning for is a 10%, 10.6% change in cost, or almost $80,000. So again, when we talk about those, you're building a budget, and without changing anything, with just rate changes on ERS, again, there's the 80,000. So we're already at 380,000, and we haven't changed anything. So this is a breakdown, diving really into the weeds here, but this is really Christine and our team do We have to pan it over 2 fiscal years, and this is how we plan out our budgets and what the rates are. But the key takeaway here is it's an additional $80,000 on our budgets just for the retirement costs of our employee retirement system, which is our non-certified staff. You've seen this before. Want to include it again in case anybody had any questions. Our WADA, we showed this to you last meeting. There were some issues. We worked with our districts, got things cleaned up. We think they're set now, and these are our final WADA numbers, our belief. So we can see our WADA overall. Resident weighted average daily attendance is our WADA. I sometimes forget to say that. It's a combination of the student population's attendance, as well as certain students are weighted differently or more than other students. So it's not just straight enrollment. It's a formula that is calculating our WADA, and it's reported on the ST3 every August/September for school districts. So we use the 1920 WADA as we build our 21-22 budgets. In different COSERs, our WADA is used. You see it in management services, you see it in ISC COSERs, and you'll see it in our admin budget. Admin and capital budget is based off of being distributed by our WADA. So where you do see some gains when the overall decreases, you know, those districts do see those exponential increases. Shazy, Plattsburgh, Schroon Lake, for example. So that wraps up budget development factors. I'll open it up for any questions before I dive into budgets. All right. So I'm going to be doing a lot of the talking here. Dr. Davey said it at the get-go, but really this is a process as we set budgets led by Dr. Davey. Our team, a phenomenal one, by the way. Our directors, Director Slattery, Director Friedman, Assistant Superintendent Gray, Christine Myers overseeing the whole financial process, working with our 3 accountants throughout this whole process. This is a heavy lift. I'm doing a lot of talking. I'm a small piece of it. Proud piece of this, proud partner in the production of it. I'll do the talking. I deserve none of the credit. So diving in, we'll talk about CV Tech first. 101, 102, 104, that's our enrollment averaging COSERs. That's our high school CTE programming. We show you this. We first presented this slide last year to you as we're diving into enrollment averaging, and it's going very, very well, been well received by our districts. I'm going to draw your attention to a few things. So overall total in 2021 was 576 students. So that's this current school year. That's the amount we're billing to districts if you did on a per student tuition rate. We don't, obviously, we do enrollment averaging, but if it was the old model, that's what we're billing out. We actually had, as of a December 1 lock-in date, 590 students. So really our enrollment in CTE is a significant increase. We're 15 above what the enrollment averaging is. That's very positive. When you go from year to year, you can see our new enrollment averaging number for next year is 576.87. And you would think that number would go up, right? Because I just said we have 590, not 576. The reason it's not is because you actually have to look back 5 years. So 5 years ago, the number falling off is like 188, 189 that we had back then. So really, it's really almost an even swap. So there's not a big increase from year to year. There is fluctuations within districts, though. So some districts, you know, have been having steady climb in their enrollment. So you can see there's going up. Others have had a steady decrease. And what we've done, and what's great about this, is some of our districts have had an increase of, even our small districts, of 10 students in 1 year. Typically 10 students in 1 year is a $120,000 budget issue. What we see with this enrollment averaging is that 10 student climb is now spread out over 5 years. So this smoothing effect that we have, you can see some of our districts here with 20s and 15% increases. If you compare that to their enrollment increase actually is even steeper and higher. So they're still paying less than what they're actually sending. So their increase is a high percent, but the number of students they're sending is actually above what their average.
Yeah, and Mr. Paul, if I could just jump in for 1 second and say, Mrs. Boyce, you may remember, and Ms. Giro, was maybe before you were on the board, we had a couple of years, and one of Mrs. Friedman's first years, we actually had a $600,000 hole. Mrs. Myers will remember that because I think she was our acting business official then. And it's essentially because one of our districts actually, from what they had intended, and there had been almost a 20-student swing in one of our districts, and there were significant swings. So the enrollment averaging is huge to help stabilize our finances going forward, and it's actually really supporting our students' needs. And districts are feeling that they're getting their value, especially when they have students. They may have, as Mr. Bell mentioned, more students that are coming in. And it helps them allow certain priority areas to have more students. For example, our New Visions medical program or our New Visions engineering. Both have been a significant, great program that's added and very, very positive in terms of desire to get in. But that also causes the whole concern about if we had to pay all those tuitions at once, the districts may not be able to afford it. So I really just wanted to acknowledge Mrs. Friedman, our CTE Advisory Committee of CSOs, and Mr. Bell, who last year laid this out. It made sense, and they went forward with it, and it really has helped our CV Tech program stabilize their funding stream.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Davey. And to put numbers with the comments that I was making, Sable Valley's average is at 52. This year they have 64 students. Going to the bottom, Ticonderoga 25.75. This year they have 33 students. Willsboro, they have 15 this year. So that's where you see them with large jumps, the 20%, 15%, 13%. However, their enrollment's even much higher than that. So again, it allows those students the great opportunity to come to CV Tech because our districts can gradually plan to build in their budgets. It's working out great. Overall, big number to look at here is what is our revenue total overall budget climbing? 1.79%. So we're able to keep it under 1.8%. And what's that mean if we broke it down on a tuition per student basis, it equals a 1.7% increase on rate. I can tell you this will be year 6 in a row that rate has changed less than 2%. So that is great news and opportunity for our districts. Enrollment helps to drive that, so we continue to offer great programming, really awesome program that excites our kids and gets students to come here. And as we continue to drive enrollment, it helps to keep the cost down. As Dr. Davey had mentioned, New Vision Applied Engineering, it's a note at the bottom. That is a program that will run separate of the formula for 3 years. So they will be charged per student basis of $12,100 for students that attend that after the 3 years. That will then move into our formula. So for this upcoming year, tuition for that program will be $12,100 per student. Last slide for CV Tech, a brief one, but an introduction to our layout that you'll be seeing the rest of the presentation. And I'm going to just take time to explain it. Left-hand side, COSR number. Next item up is the description of the COSR. The current year rate is our next column. And then the proposed 21-22 rate, what we're presenting to the board, what we're presenting to this committee, and what we're going to present to our superintendents of cost to join that COSR. That's what you're going to see in the 21-22 line. Then we give you a couple year-to-year comparison lines, dollar increase from 1 year of COSR rate to the next year of the COSR rate, and then a percent increase on that rate. So those apply directly to rate. Last year we started two new columns to really give more details. We like to give deep dives in this, and it helps to explain what's going on in a COSR. We now give budget to budget change from this current year to next year. What is that change in the budget that we're proposing? And then the last column is that rate change. What does that mean to districts? So take the number of, for example, that first one would be take the number of students in the program, times it by that rate change. The extra cost to districts is $10,222. So that's the additional revenue that we are now generating from that COSR rate change. So for these programs, pre-CTE is the big one here. Online high school is a smaller piece of this. The budget has decreased in this area as we have had reduced number of students. We talked about that last meeting. It was kind of where our student enrollment was down in this program. So you can see a reduced budget because there's less supports needed, and staffing has declined in this area, and we've actually shifted classes to our 101, 102, and 104. And you can see the rate change equates to $10,000 to the districts. And overall, when you look at it, there's a net decrease in our budget in these coasters of 24%, and the increased revenue generated is 1.68%. Any questions on CV Tech as a whole? Okay. We're going to dive into special ed, and this is where that breakdown, again, it's the same concept of the slides going left to right. 205, 208, 210, 220. It's our top 4 items. Those are our classrooms. And those are the classrooms in Plattsburgh and Mineville combined together for those programs. We spent a lot of time talking about enrollment in this area. 205, we were down in enrollment about 5 students from what we budgeted this current year. And 208, when we presented to you last time, was down enrollment 13 students in this current budget. And where does that reflect? If you look at reduced cost in those classrooms, when we go budget to budget, you do see the significant decrease in cost in those areas. And that's what we've been able to attribute savings from that reduced enrollment. Why is it so large in 208? We were able to reduce a whole classroom. So Director Slattery this year is 1 classroom less in 208. We also talked about 210 being increased enrollment this year. So you can see here there's an increase in our budget change of $288,000. We did add a class in this area, added staffing to it, and you can see that's where our significant budget increase is. As you can look at down through the rates, you can see of our rate changes in this area. Also what we're going to charge for tuition for students in the top 4. And then all the way to the right is really what is that revenue rate change? And I'm going to touch on our biggest increase in our classrooms, which is our 205. Enrollment is the biggest thing here. I talked about how we were down in enrollment 5 students. It's not enough to cut a class, right? So we can go ahead and cut a class, but it's not going to save us any money. So it doesn't make sense to do so because of the age ranges that students are spread out amongst this. If we add the rate difference, so the rate increase is just under 4%. When you look at that dollar impact, it's $54,978. It pretty much is the amount. It's just under the amount of 1 more student, right? So when you look at that, what we're doing is raising the rate to cover the loss of 1 tuition-paying student. So if we can get 1 more student than what we're budgeting for, it actually offsets that cost increase totally. So it's going to be very important. And what our team does is we'll be analyzing enrollment all the way up until the start of the new school year. But potentially, I mean, that's something that we can make up easily if our enrollment maintains or actually gains 1 student. I mean, so that's what you can see with our rate changes there. The other big item I'm going to bring to your attention is aids. We do have a large decrease in the budget, and that reasoning there is what districts are requesting for aids is down significantly from previous years. So there's a big reduction in the budget, but our cost per aid isn't going down. So our rate is still going up because the aids we do have to cover their cost change from year to year. So in what I feel is still a bargain, we're looking at charging districts $38,925 per aid, again covering their salary, their health benefits, and their fringe costs. That's what will be charged for a 1-to-1 aid per district. Overall, net, what do you look at budget to budget? This budget is actually decreasing, and I want to touch on, we talked a little bit about salary and health costs early on. Sorry, really, we talked about health being $300,000. We talked about retirement system being $80,000. Dove into it with special ed. We looked at this as we were building these budgets early on in the process. We started to look at where our challenges were. On a year-to-year basis, just in special ed, our salary increase was $330,000. So right off the top, we have $330,000 in salary. Our fringe increase was $180,000, and our health increase was $145,000. So he said, Director Slattery, welcome to VOCE's budgeting. We want to very limit our rates charged to districts. We have some enrollment drops in different areas. what can we do to make this work? And we worked very closely under Dr. Davies' leadership, direction, to find ways that we're not increasing our budget $655,000. So that was the big thing, and try to maintain our rates at a very reasonable and sustainable level. Kudos to the team. This was a very challenging area. We're very pleased with the rates that we were putting out. And now it's going to be analyzing, what does the enrollment look like? What does the participation look like? And then making those decisions on, we do have a potential where we may end up having to cut a class or cut certain support services, but that's something that we'll analyze based on district needs as we approach the new year. Director Slattery, Dr. Davey, I'll open up to you. I believe this is my last slide for special ed, my only one. Our only one. I didn't make it.
I'll just weigh in for 1 minute, and then Matt, why don't you bring it home for the last part? And I didn't say anything before we kind of transitioned right into special ed, but the work of our directors and our assistant superintendents has been amazing with our teams. There was a lot of belt tightening. There were adjustments. So I can't say enough about the work that went into this. Mrs. Myers and the accountants, Mr. Bell, Mr. Slattery, Mrs. Friedman, Terry, Calabrese Gray, everyone really rolled up their sleeves and got down into the weeds to be able to look at our budgets and say, we understand it's a tight year for our districts. How can we try to limit our increases, but still provide the high quality service that we're known for? And I really want to commend our team for that. And Mr. Slattery, I'll let you, add some comments, but I want to commend you and everyone on this call, including Mrs. Friedman, who wasn't able to be here tonight, just to say, great job, team, and we're so proud of the work that you and your team are doing to really move this forward.
Thank you, Dr. Davey. I just wanted to, briefly thank, when you say it was a team approach, it definitely was, and from Mrs. Myers to Assistant Superintendent Bell, to our two accountants that worked together on this through a transition. I mean, they really did that seamlessly, and I think it was the planning of this leadership team that made that happen. Definitely some challenges this year due to the pandemic, and we're really pleased, with this outcome. It sets us up hopefully for an enrollment increase where we can sustain additional students. But yeah, overall, very, very pleased with the process going through it the first time, and really the support of the team to make it possible. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Director Slattery and Dr. Davey. Next item up is our instructional services budgets. Zoom in here without trying to cut everything off. That almost gets it all. I'm cutting off the top part again, but it flows again. The area here is our current, what we're charging districts. The next column over is what we're proposing, and then so on and so forth. Big item here in where we like to focus with our instructional services center is budget to budget. What are we looking at? And then what is truly the biggest piece here is what is the dollar impact to school districts? Budget to budget, I like to try to explain in this area. Down here at the bottom, you can see a $222,000 decrease. That is, a lot of it's driven by purchase services, flow through costs, certain things that districts may not be participating in anymore. It's not specifically people per se. Usually, typically, and here it is a chunk of it, is what services are districts using as far as flow through costs flowing to them. When we look at that rate change, it's $19,000 additional revenue being brought in just by a rate change, or 0.56% across the board. So very small rate change there. And that's one that, again, we are very proud of that. These are very thin budgets. There's not much, there is no fluff in them. It's critical here for participation. So any fluctuation in participation, down by a district or two districts, it is very detrimental to any one of these coasters. So it's very critical that, and there's nobody better than Assistant Superintendent Gray with managing these coasters and working hand in hand with Christine Myers, that they are constantly observing, are they meeting the district needs in these coasters? Is it working? And are there new coasters we need to develop? And to that extent, there are new coasters in here that were developed this year during a pandemic in some of the most challenging times. One of them I want to point out, and that's our instructional technology coaster, 564, that kicked off this year. We are actually proposing to keep that flat as a team. That's, I would say, our fastest growing coaster, as I believe we're up to 4, maybe 5 districts now, and others that are knocking on our door, right, to help support them in their need in instructional technology. So kudos to the team creating that, developing it, and realizing a need out there of our districts and jumping on it. Subcoordination's another one down at the bottom, again, looking to keep that flat and supporting our school districts in a coaster that is actively growing. So as we have coasters grow, and that's the big thing, is we want to increase usage of these coasters, and it helps offset those increasing costs, because these coasters have the same thing, salary, fringe, health, that are growing just like our districts do. But if we can have more participation, buying different services, allocating our costs to the services that are growing and building, we're able to maintain these low 0.56% increases on rates. So kudos to the team there, and I'll open it up to the team, Dr. Davey and Terry, to jump in.
Actually, just a quick question. I just got a text from Mrs. Boyce, who said, and so that Mrs. Boyce and Ms. Giro, I don't know if you're having difficulty. We were having some major difficulties today with WebEx. One of our webinars was going in and out. Pictures were turning on and off. Mrs. Boyce has indicated that she's the entire presentation has been very difficult to listen to, and that it's been really broken up. So I'm just wondering if we would be wise to just switch to Teams. It would be a matter of re-signing in and just pausing. I know we're probably 2/3 of the way through, but just wondering, it doesn't seem to be on our end with the internet, but WebEx was having some real difficulties today. So, Mr. Beck.
It's finally leveled out. There's no more screens going in and out, and I can actually hear you. So for the last 15 minutes, I've been able to hear the presentation, but for the first 35 or the first 30 minutes, I didn't hear anything.
Okay. So that's good that you can hear now. I apologize. We did check it out this morning or this afternoon. I know Alex was working on it. I talked to Alex, and we were having some major problems, but it wasn't our internet. It wasn't our network. It was actually some issues WebEx was having. So if it sounds like we're okay to keep moving forward. Ms. Giro, are you at least hearing and observing as well?
Yes, I am. It's going out in and out myself, and this is what happened the last time we were. I was on with our regular monthly meeting. It kind of the picture was going in and out, so I do see that happening. But I'm hearing you. Okay. You're hearing me okay?
Oh, very well, very clear.
Okay.
Yeah, and Mrs. Boyce, you were crystal. You both are crystal clear. So okay, so it sounds like we can at least keep moving. I don't know if it's the sharing of the screen or if it's some other glitch, but we apologize. You know, it's hard to follow a presentation if you're only getting bits and pieces.
Terry, anything else you'd like to add on instructional services?
I would just, first of all, thanks to Christine. She's my partner in crime. It's very difficult doing these budgets because we have very small base fees and we have very small RWADA based on students. So really the way we generate revenue is through, services. So the more services that are bought or the more projects or more jobs that they're created, the more revenue we can generate. And we have to regenerate that revenue to then fill that gap in the budget. So every year it's definitely challenging, and this year has made it very difficult. But I would say so far, besides a couple of our coasters, we're actually doing pretty well, which says a lot about our employees and the dedication, and just really being flexible to the needs of our districts and trying new things, which I think will actually benefit us in the future. So it's definitely always challenging, but I just say it's going to look different in future years, and that's part of what's exciting because we will do business differently. So,
And Mr. Bell, if I can just weigh in, as I was just talking about technical difficulties, Terry, you and your team, and I know Mrs. Myers, you spent a lot of time reviewing this and really coming up with a percent. That the percent is very low, considering some of the challenges that you were faced. You know, it's wonderful work. Some of our services, like the interscholastic athletics, have just exploded, and without that, for the last week, we wouldn't have been able to even have discussions hardly about the athletics that you'll be hearing about as we go forward, you know, with the board. But some major areas, and Terry, you do a great job making sure that our folks are working hard and the team is working well. And then you look at the budget numbers and you say, wow, there's actually a reduction of a budget, $222,000, almost $223,000, and the percent increase is very low considering this time frame. So thank you. Good job, well done as well.
Thank you, Dr. Davey. The COSA that we want to touch on, and it's highlighted here, we're in black and white, but was the transition from per district per Arwada fee to a per district per sport fee in our 554 interscholastic sports coordination. We're going to dive into some details here. We briefly discussed this at our original budget committee meeting, just to give you a heads up saying this is coming. We're anticipating a change to this. It's been requested by our CSOs. So we have come up with a plan. Dr. Davey, Terry, Matt Wallentuck is our executive director of Section 7. Christine and myself worked together to present this plan to our CSOs, our component district CSOs, and they were accepting of the proposal. And that proposal is, instead of using our WADA, we're going to use a per sport fee. So basically saying, you know, our WADA takes into account all of your students, including elementary students, and it's not really a driver and a dictator of your cost per se or your use of our service, which truly is an executive director of Section 7, as well as an assigner. And we actually polled the rest of the state, and we found that 5 other sections do a per sport fee and then a flat fee to participate in the service. So we came up with our own plan similar to those other sections. We were actually, just so you're aware, we're the only ones that have the per district fee and an Arwada fee across the state. There was one other that included a small percent as Arwada, but had a per sport fee and a base fee. So we realized that we did a correction was appropriate, and we've taken action to present that to our superintendents. And what we did is 85% of the total budget, $147,000, would be applied to a per sport fee. And then 15% of the budget would be applied to a per district, or what we've known as a base fee, charged to all districts. Here's the full detail of how it shakes out and what the impacts on districts are. The big changes are large districts have our discounted rate. They're actually going to save money in this, and our smaller districts are paying more across the board. And then some of our districts, such as Seton Catholic, who is in a component district or another district, it's just billed out separately, is increasing pretty significantly in this equation, $3,275. But this, when presented to the CSO, they agreed and said, yes, please move forward with it. We presented to you tonight that this is the change in methodology. Next step, we presented to all 26 superintendents on Friday to show them this is the change. And then actually our CSOs will have to vote on this. So at a CSO meeting, Dr. Davey will call a vote of our superintendents to change the methodology, and then we would move forward with this. So this is what we are proposing, changing that interscholastic athletics coordination COSER. Next item up is management services COSERs. The big one here is our 602 health insurance workers' compensation coordination COSER. Last year, we had developed a plan to increase the budget 126% to create a benefit coordination office, as hiring a full-time administrator and moving away from a part-time per diem retiree. That was built into last year's budget. However, with the budget challenges that we had, We actually made the decision to present, working through the board and Dr. Dave's leadership, to present to the CSOs, what if we waited until January 1 to start that? This would save 50% of the cost, and then we could roll it into next year to be the rest of the increase, but also we'll know what our exact costs are. So that's where this, typically what we'd be seeing here is another 70-75% increase. However, we had advantageously hires with lower salary than budgeted, as well as health insurance plans that weren't taken as family. So that's really good news for this COSER, and we're able to set not a 70% increase or 75% increase, it's a 26% increase. So this was one that our CSOs knew it was a 2-year strategy to do, and now we're up to our full budget in that COSER. Labor relations is on here, and it is highlighted. CVES found out in July of 2020 that Capital Region BOCES was not going to offer their labor relations service. Dr. Davey and the board made moves immediately to start one, and we are currently supporting 4 districts plus the BOCES in our labor relations COSERs with a retiree, Dr. Hollis Palmer. We've asked our districts and polled our districts, are you interested in CVS continuing the service / building it? Because really we kind of put in that Band-Aid, right? There was districts that needed support. We provided it to those districts, but we want to grow this. We think it's very advantageous for all of our districts to have a labor relations service in the area and have a consistent labor mindset and leadership amongst all districts. So we actually are meeting with them tomorrow at noontime to go over the budget, discuss it, and present to them our thoughts. So we are looking at, depending on the number of districts, if it's all 16, which it's unlikely, we could be looking at a director of labor relations and a labor relations specialist. If it's less districts, depending on the number, we could be just looking at a director, or we could be just looking at a labor specialist. The number of districts that want to participate will help to drive this, and it's one we're actively discussing with our superintendents on an ongoing basis. So, but excited about that one coming back to us. Lastly, I'll touch on our Central School Food Management COSER. That does have a 3.31% increase in rate. However, that one we were able to get the $50,000 grant to help offset costs in 2021. $25,000 went to that year, this current year, and then $25,000 actually will go to offset the cost for next year as well. That's not included in the rate. We didn't want to put it up there. It drops the rate down to under $100 per our WADA. So very advantageous for our districts in that COSER. And that, again, is our Julie Holbrook COSER. Questions on managed service COSERs? Okay. Admin budget. I hear something?
I'm sorry, I said Mr. Bell. I just want to give you credit as well for your leadership in helping not only with all the divisions, but also in our management services and administrative budget development. I know you really got down in the weeds, and there is strength sometimes to being at the gestalt level, the 30,000 foot level, but there's also times when you want to drill down. And when we get down, when we really look at our administrative budget, we look at our management services budget, we look at establishing a new service, these are designed to support our districts. And the other piece that I had never heard it shared, although I remember, one of our DSs, former DSs, talking about it, and he said, BOCES state aid is probably the best equalizer in the country to help districts have more equity. So if you think about it, the districts that have the highest percentages are some of the more challenged districts financially. So what the state aid factor is designed to do is to help bring up the floor to be able to say next year you'll get aid back on this and help your district. So I had never really thought about it that way, but it really is designed to be an equalizer for equity across the state. We've heard a lot about equity. We've heard a lot about educational funding, but you think about some of our districts. Mrs. Boyce Plattsburgh, I think, is close to 70%. I think Osable Valley, Ms. Giro, is similar. I think one of our highest districts is almost at the 80% level. Those are designed to try to help our districts that don't have the funding structure and the financial resources to really balance the playing field. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and say, it's a challenge for all of us with the budgets in each district, but really, the BOCES plays such an important role, not only in the North Country, but across the state. But we really have tried hard to continue to have that service mentality. So thank you.
Well said, Dr. Davey. So our admin budget, this is a general overview. We'll dive into detail on each one of them. But again, one thing I want to point out is our admin budget without retiree benefits. Dr. Davey had a directive this year of keeping that flat, right? That is not an easy task with salary, benefits, health insurance increasing. I've said it multiple times, but it's one where we're trying to send a message to our district. There's a portion of this budget we can control, and we're doing our best to control it, maintain it, and assist you where we can. And that is holding this budget flat. Our retiree health insurance costs, we'll dive into details there, but that is almost an 8% increase in our admin budget. You can dive into details. Feel free to ask any questions that you may have. We gave you the full breakdown. I'm not going to go into too much detail unless you have questions, but really a breakdown of our multiple categories. So we have 4 separate portions of our admin budget, which is the BOCES Board, District Superintendent, General Admin, and Central Support. This is a breakdown of those changes that you can see in this area. Our retiree health benefit changes fall under the right here, where you can see the 5.146 million, significant increase there from year to year. That's where you're going to see that change, and that's our net cost of components is increasing, almost wholly driven by that amount.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Bell, just one last comment is to say, especially when you look at our administrative budget, the biggest increase, the big factor is the retiree health insurance. And so even if we keep our administrative budget at 0, there's a significant increase in the retiree health insurance. And as we've seen, and you've seen Mrs. Boyce and Ms. Giro, that we've had more retirements this year than we normally schedule for plan for. Why? Because the challenges of COVID have helped people realize that maybe it is time for me to retire and take advantage of that. And so we've actually budgeted at a higher level this year. And I know, Mrs. Myers, you've continued to watch it very closely. But it's something that, our districts are keenly aware of, but it is part of our biggest expenses in terms of the BOCES budget. So it's something that we're faced with, and we continue to work on that as well.
Yeah, this is the sheet that will give you full detail. Full breakdown of what we're looking at in our retiree portion of our admin budget, retiree health insurance costs. Again, we're using that 4% family and individual and 2.5% Medicare. The big item here is more people are retiring than what are coming off. It's an annual item that we're dealing with. We already have pretty much 10 known retirements. We do prorate it if they retire, say, in August instead of July 1. So you do see 9.92 are known. We are budgeting for 4 additional. We do have some who have told us that they plan to retire, but haven't submitted any letter to the district superintendent at this point. So we are planning for a buffer of 4 plans to come on board as well, which is tight. I think it's tighter than most years. But again, we don't want to be overly conservative because we're already scooping up 10 new plans in here. So it's one that we're going to be monitoring closely and discussing with the board if adjustments need to be made as we go through. But really, that's a breakdown. We can go into any detail that you'd like. But at the end of the day, at the bottom, the amount attributed to premium increase and plan changes is $24,000. Very small amount driven by that 2.5% Medicare primary. That's big. So if that is low, 2.5% or lower, that's a big help to this budget. If it goes higher, that impacts all of our Medicare primary plans, which you can see in our budget is 229 plans, and the rest, the individual and family, are very small number, very small percent as compared to that. Sorry, and that's just plan 1. Plan 2 on top of that is another 24 plans. So significant majority is Medicare primary. Capital budget, really want to dive into this. This is one that we've teed up throughout this year in talking about changes in our capital budget. We always have to talk about now. This is for linked currently with the tax cap calculation. Started last year, continues into this year, that any change to our capital budget impacts the school district tax cap. There's now a BOCES capital exclusion as part of that tax cap. It falls in with the other exclusions. It's not a change on your growth factor. It really truly is just a year-to-year exclusion that can go up or down from year to year. Our goal as a BOCES is to level that out and try to keep it flat. We don't want the ebbs and flows and significant swings on the tax cap. Right now we have this item, the capital portion of our budget, or $474,000 that gets distributed into the tax cap calculation. We also have our voter approved capital project, right? So any of those debt payments that districts are making flow into this calculation as well. And we will work with all of our district. Christine gives them a report on an annual basis of what numbers to use. The big item here is ISC is starting to come off our books, right? Because our plan is that by the end of September, we're moved out of ISC. So we only need it for a quarter of the year, and the other 3 quarters we can take off our budget. So what's happening is we're going from $86,000 to $22,000 in lease costs at ISC. Our proposal is not to take that money off, that $60,000, take it off and remove it from our budget. Our proposal is that we take that money and move it into our transfer to capital fund, which is our mini capital projects. So, you know, we've done our fire alarm, Mineville, Plattsburgh. We've done our water line, Plattsburgh. We've done exterior doors in Plattsburgh. I should say they're ongoing. We've done boilers in Mineville, so on and so forth. Different projects have been done through this annual fund. The important piece here is, as a BOCES, we went through a time and good leadership by the board and Dr. Davey to endeavor a near $30 million capital project. That was due to lack of annual projects being done over the years to maintain our facilities. We can't do that again. Our districts have told us, our communities have told us, this is a one-time shot. Don't expect this again in the future. So it's on us. It's on us as a BOCES to maintain our facilities. We have 5 campuses. It's on us to be doing annual projects to sustain our facilities and prevent a $30 million capital project 10, 15, 20 years down the road. In order to do so, we need money and transfer to capital fund. There is no better time than now to keep it in there, because if we take it out, it's actually a negative on districts' tax caps and will reduce districts' tax caps. If we leave it in there, move it to transfer to capital, it levels that tax cap out and keeps it flat. So this is part of our ongoing plan. We've shared with the board a number of projects that we need to look at over the next 5 years of items that need to be completed in our facilities as far as maintaining them. This would allot us $428,000 as part of a mini capital project to do the work. And it may be, and really what we'd have to do is take multiple years, combine them together, and look to do a $800,000 or a $1.2 million capital project. The following year, when ISC comes off fully, we would look to shift that $22,000 into this location as well, to have about $450,000 in annual project funds. The important piece here, we got to focus on it. It's important because we actually impact district's tax cap by whatever we do in our capital budget. We're proposing that we don't have any impact from year to year by maintaining as flat. Sorry, long-winded on that. I know it's just complicated with the new tax cap rules. More details, more breakdown of per district, what it means to them for as far as our admin budget goes, what the breakdown is of the DS for next year, how the state covers a portion of that as well. again, throwing a lot out there. One of the pieces here I'd like to say, and I don't think I have in this presentation, and Christine, you might know off the top of your head, but our districts vote on our admin budget in April, like we said. If they voted down, we go to contingency. The way we've structured our budget this year, we're actually below contingency threshold. So basically, if our budget is voted down by component districts, it would increase our admin budget if it got voted down. Is that an accurate statement, Christine?
Yes, it is. Primarily because of the increase in TRS and ERS expenses. They're factored into contingency, and we kept the budget flat with those increases. So yes, it'd be like, I think it was like $6,900 higher.
So, yeah, and Mr. Bell, while you're showing the surplus slide, one of the conversation points that we've been having in cabinet is that when our districts look at their charges for special ed and other services, they regularly plan on getting a surplus check back. It's generally designed so that they don't have to put it in any particular area. They can put it in a reserve. They can use it for unexpected expenses. But one of the conversation points that we've been having is this is money that the districts really count on. But if you were to deduct that from from our services that they are receiving, it could really make the services even more affordable. So I guess, and I know Mrs. Boyce and Ms. Giro, as you think about the budgeting and the component districts, that's a really key factor, especially when you look at the amount of money that our districts have received back. And it's not that we're overcharging, it's that the funding and streams and various factors do come into play that we're able to at least support, and all that money does go back to our districts once our expenses are met. So we really essentially have a big budget, but then we have a zero balance at the end of the year. So just wanted to share that. So Mr. Bell, thanks for letting me add that along the way as well.
It's a great message, Mark. It really is. And it's one of, and why we share this too is you can see in 1920 we had an increased surplus, and at the board level we did explain that we had some savings due to the pandemic. We really tried to maximize the savings we could, knowing the tough financial times our districts are in, to flow as much money back to districts as possible. 18-19, we returned $700,000. That's probably a typical range, even maybe on the high end still of a typical range, what we'd see, because we're budgeting pretty tight here. So to have 1.3 flow back, that was huge for our districts. And to Dr. Davies' point, in special ed, tuition of $50,000, if we would have added, we had one, just so you know, over $1 million in surplus in special ed last year. So if we would have had one more student come to CVS and the tuition was $50,000, that full $50,000 of that extra student would have got billed to the district. But at the end of the year, all that money would have flowed back to all the districts participating in that COSA. So you have 10 districts in the COSA, they all got $5,000 because we added one student. It's the beauty of what we do that gets misplaced and doesn't get realized, that we don't keep money. We're not in the business of making money. We're in the business of providing high quality services. And if we do happen to make money per se, or have money in excess of what we need in our budget, we give it all back. And at the end of the day, it just reduces the cost of that service in the COSA. So when districts charge out fees to send students to their districts for, say, a special ed service or a special ed class, they typically will quote our tuition. However, if that district makes 10, 15 grand on that student, that goes right in that district's pocket. It doesn't flow back to the district that purchased the service. And also that is lost revenue for CVES, which means it's not revenue for us. When we say revenue for CVS, we mean it's all money flowing back to the districts that participate in that COSA. Could be 5, could be 10 districts missing out on $5,000 or $10,000, and all that money is flowing into a district's pocket. So really, really good to point that out, Dr. David. Great point. Again, we're very pleased to give that back, that $1.3 million. Not expecting that amount this year. Again, we're living in a pandemic. We don't know what the rest of the year looks like. But we always like to point that out, that money, we are able to flow money back to the districts. Questions on budgets. Before I go into our last topic of the night, open it all up, CV Tech, Special Ed, ISC, Management Services, Admin Budget, or Surplus.
I just have a question. Do you anticipate that, I mean, everything seems to be moving along better than what you had anticipated at this point with what everybody's dealing with the pandemic. So if things were to turn around, where do you think that services would be cut? Are you looking at those ongoingly, to evaluate what you would have to cut if necessary?
Yeah, it's a constant communications with our superintendents. So Dr. Davey currently is leading weekly meetings with our CSOs. We constantly work with every one of our districts that participate in our services, whether it's CSE chairs, it's high school principals, it's the superintendents. We always have ongoing conversations with them to say, what are your interests? What are you planning to need? What's your needs? What services are you going to be a part of? And then we really know, all right, do we have not enough districts here that we're actually going to have to make cuts? Do we not have enough students in a certain area? So really, every one of our coasters, we look at, dive in just like that for all of them. Over 100 different coasters, we look at what are the needs of the districts, what's the participation level, and then we make that determination. For this year, and Dr. David, please cut me off if you like. This year, I'm looking at, we're not anticipating any at this time. We have seen that districts still are kind of hesitant to dive into full services at BOCES because of the unknown, right? They don't know what the spring looks like. So we can tell they're holding back, right? They got cards in their sleeves trying to save here, save there. They have needs, but they haven't dove in to get those needs addressed by the BOCES yet. So that's something that we've been seeing. We know their needs there, but they haven't fully dove in yet.
Right. And Mr. Bell, the only other point I'd add, that's a great question, Mr. Giro, is when you think about our BOCES services and all these coasters, and we've talked about it previously, they're almost like individual businesses. So if a business cannot self-sustain in the long term, that business is not going to stay open. The same would be true for our coasters. And essentially back, a decade ago when there was a huge, financial setback, and I believe, Terry, at that time, it was about 150 staff members from CVES who were reduced. Over time, many of them came back, but there was widespread, especially in special education. We had many more programs out in school districts, and they were cut back, and districts brought back their own students. Eventually, they came back, and many of them came back. Many of our staff returned over time, but it was a multi-year process. And you may even remember, Ms. Giro, and Ms. Boyce would, I'm sure, when hearing about the GEA. It's the gap elimination adjustment, and it took us almost 10 years to get that money back to the schools. So the federal stimulus monies right now are being referred to as a second GEA. That's been some of the informal conversations that the DSs have been having. And if there's that type of cliff that we faced already once, that's a big concern, especially if that cliff of $7 billion drops off. The last piece I will say is David Little, as the rural schools executive director, has said with meetings with me multiple times. A decade ago, when the GEA hit and there was the financial cutback, the rural economy helped support the comeback of our state. At this point, we've lost over 1 million people, and the census will document that. So our rural economy is not as strong as it used to be. We still have New York City really supporting, but the rural economy has taken some hits. And I think that's one of the difference in the economic landscape now that we'll have to face. But to go back to your original question, it's really about the programs and the district supporting them. If they can't afford them because they have to cut back, they will cut back where it hurts them the least. And that would then in turn cause us to have to reduce staff. So thank you.
Great questions. All right, seeing no further, I'm going to jump to our next item on our agenda, and CVS Reserves. The big thing with reserves is we try to talk about it, year round. This isn't a one-time conversation. Come June, surprise board, we want to fund reserves. So we've discussed this at the board level. We shared our reserve plan September, October. can't remember exactly which one, but a September, October meeting. We share it with you as informational purposes, what that reserve plan looks like. Talks about methodologies, funding, structure of each reserve. Here's a summary report that was part of that, of really where we ended our year last year. And I bring this up because we got some big talking points that we need to discuss, and we need to continue to discuss them. Unemployment reserves is one of them. You can see we're at 295,000. The board members are aware that we've had multiple unemployment claims. High, over 95% of them not eligible for the claim. We've been actively pursuing and fighting them. However, we continue to get billed for those costs, or at least we were through the summer, and we're fighting to get those money back. We believe we'll get it back, but nothing's guaranteed, right? Those costs, and thank you, Christine, for the number, $57,000, right? So when we look at the spring, summer, and then the fall charges to date, we're at $57,000 in just unemployment costs, and we didn't lay anybody off. Again, we're fighting them all, but it's something that we're going to monitor. So we're actively pursuing it. Dr. Davies has given us full support in this and has helped us pursue these, and we're hopeful that those get erased, and we have zero. But at the end of the year, if we don't win any, we may want to consider looking at using some of this reserve to cover those costs, and then potentially, if we have funds available, looking at funding it. Not anticipating it, but want to give you an early heads up on that, to keep an eye on that reserve. Employee benefit accrued liability reserve is one that we reopened, the board reopened, and we've been funding it. This reserve is the one that's tied to really what we look at as sick leave payouts. And through the negotiation process, we knew we had to impact our admin budget. And a way to do that was retiree health insurance and forcing or creating contributions to retirement premiums, health insurance premiums in retirement. And a way to do that is we implemented health sick leave buyouts, which we can fund through the EBLR reserve. So it's important that we had a trade-off. Those kick in for our instructional staff in a couple of years. So we're still 2 years removed there, but those sick leave payouts have begun already, to the tune of about $20,000 if you have full sick day allotment, or I should say 80. It's 80 right now, sick days. That'll come out of this reserve. We're going to want to actively use this reserve, but also fund it. You can see our liability is $1.6 million. We're funded at $600,000. If funds are available this year, we need to target that reserve again, build that up. But again, it's being used for a good purpose, which is hopefully the long run, and it will in the long run help that admin budget, retiree health insurance cost that has been exponentially growing for years. Skipping over to TRS, the teacher retirement system, that is the one that you can fund 2% of your TRS salaries up to a maximum of 10%. So it takes 5 years to fund the reserve. You can see we've allotted 2 years of funding already. So years 1 and 2 are done. We're going to recommend that year 3, we look at funding that same amount, $193,000, and we'd be 3 out of 5 years funded in that reserve with 2 more to go. Very critical for CVS to continue to look at this reserve and build it. We had a slight decrease in TRS this year, so we didn't need it. But again, if the market begins to decline and we have a crash, so on and so forth, TRS rates are going to start to increase. It's 9.5% to 10% right now. We've seen it as high as close to 18% in just the last 10 years. So an 8% increase on us is $10 million is $80,000. Sorry, $80,000. Did I do that math right? No, $800,000 is what that would cost us. 8% of 10 million. So that's a significant amount that we need to be prepared for, and that's where that reserve is going to come into play to help sustain for years until that reserve, that amount can come down. So really diving into those things, CT equipment reserve, you'll see that increase significantly because of the sale of our PAI equipment. The most it can increase in a single year is $800,000. We're looking at about $750,000 will be flowing into this reserve this year. So want to give you a brief update. As a budget committee, we'll be analyzing where our monies are at. We may not have surplus available this year to do it. It may be no recommendation to the board, but if there is one, I'm trying to, prep for our conversation in May and June timeframe of the reserves that we're looking at right now. We're looking at them in September. We're still looking at them, and they got to be targets of ours for long-term sustainability. Any questions on budget? Reserve fund goals? This was the last topic of the budget committee. Dr. Davey, team, anybody? I'll really open it up to anyone. I know I've talked enough. I really appreciate our budget committee members being a part of this process, taking the deep dive with us. I know we give you a lot of information. Well, again, we want to make sure you have it all. We want to be as transparent as possible and really give you full details. So happy to answer any questions, but I'll open it up to the team as well.
I'd like to just close and say thank you to Mr. Bell and our entire team for all the work that went into this budget development. Just amazing work, and really it's a reinforcement of the superb leaders that we have, and the commitment to children. And lastly, Mrs. Boyce and Mrs. Gerald, thank you so much for being here. I know it's a lot of details, it's a lot of information. We spend weeks and weeks and months reviewing to get ready for this. And then to then come forward and say, we're going to cover it in an hour and 26 minutes. So it's a little bit like drinking out of that proverbial fire hose. So I can't say enough for you to really join us and do a great job in terms of listening and being part of our meeting. So I just have to say thank you to everybody.
Great job done by everyone. I think everybody needs a kudos on that. God knows with everything that's going on, you've had a lot on your plate, but to be able to pull this off in this short amount of time is pretty remarkable. So I commend you all for your efforts put forth.
I totally agree with what Lisa just said. It's amazing that you guys have been able to keep such a good focus on it with everything that's been going on.
Thank you so much for the kind comments. We have an amazing team. I'm very lucky to be with such an amazing group, and they're all rock stars, superstars, I should say.
Agreed. And Mrs. Friedman too, who's not here tonight. I know she was unable, but we made sure that she knew we had it covered, and we were able to present fully on her behalf. So she was as an important member of this team, and everyone really has pulled their weight. And done above and beyond. They're also, this is a second mile team, meaning that the individuals as leaders who go the second mile to do their job and support our programs and kids. So thank you.
We will see everybody February 10th. We'll be giving this presentation to the full board. If you have anything you want to add during the presentation, please don't hesitate to jump in and discuss anything that we talked about today. I hope you have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.